Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. I'm here to ask and answer one simple question. WTF is Tower of Guns. Not the kind of place that I would like to set up my average corporate meeting. Doesn't seem like a particularly good idea. Yes, can you meet me at 3 o'clock in the Tower of Guns? Ah, that sounds capital, dear boy, capital. Let's discuss the budget concerns for the third quarter of 2015. And then you get shot. That's inconvenient. Really is. That messes your schedule up. You don't want to do that. Tower of Guns is brought to you by Joe Mirabello, aka Terrible Posture Games. As far as I can tell, it's for the most part a one-man effort. I believe his wife was involved as well, with a particular mob. I'll explain that in a minute. And it is a rogue-lite FPS. Some people have taken to calling this stuff procedural death labyrinth. As amusing as that is, I'm not sure it's entirely accurate, although a lot of those games do have a tendency to kill you. I think roguelite is a better term. It is primarily an FPS, but it is built on rogue-like aspects, such as procedural generation, permanent death, and the gradual progression of your character, as well as a fairly simplistic combat system, but it's not a roguelike. So if we have a look at the options menu here, they've got quite a lot going for them, honestly, including an FOV slider. Pretty significant, actually. You know what's really nice? The fact we can keep going. We can keep going. There we go. The fact that they actually described what each of them do. That's really useful information. Most people don't know that. They don't know what kind of FOV they need. But you'll notice that it gives you a recommendation depending on what resolution and aspect ratio you're running at. That's pretty cool. We'll go with 105 because that's what the game says. That's lovely. That should be in more games. Outside that, full screen on or off, as well as a couple of different options available here. I think we can put some MSAA on there. We can actually crank this pretty high, honestly. It's not a particularly demanding game. And let's turn motion blur off, because we don't like that. Okay, cool. So we shall commit the changes, and we shall get started. And I'll show you what's going on with Tower of Guns. I'll most likely be able to show you a couple of runs, because this game is bloody hard! Bloody hard. Oh, you can do key rebinding. I should probably have mentioned that. Yeah, that's all available there as well. I don't think there's... Well, yeah, there is mouse sensitivity. It's just not as obvious. And mouse smooth is off by default, which is nice. Okay, let's dive in anyway. So I'm going to start with this weapon. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 guns available. And each of them have a requirement. So kill 250 spike ball launchers gets you this one and things like that. You start with these two by default. You then get this one quite quickly. Consolation gun, and then you've got this one, which is quite a nice sort of ion machine gun, and this one, which is my favorite one, which is a rocket launcher. You can then choose a perk. I go with Fire Force, and each of these requires different things to unlock as well, as you might imagine. This one makes you immune to environmental damage, spikes, lava, etc., which is rather useful. So let's dive in, shall we? Find out what's going on inside the Tower of Guns. Now, each of these levels actually has, interestingly enough, a par time, which is a little bit weird considering that the levels are procedurally generated. Well, they are for the most part. They're not completely procedurally generated. Like, I have seen the same rooms multiple times, including, of course, the foyers and things like that. These are hug bots, by the way. Here's something. So, a lot of people would assume you've got to kill them. You actually don't. In fact, apparently if you do, it gives you a bit of a disadvantage in terms of your drop rate and things like that. So, you can kill them for experience and cash early on, or you can leave them be. Now, how does it work? Well, as you can see, it is a first-person shooter in which you have one weapon, and you've got to get to the end. And each of the rooms, while not entirely procedurally generated, there's certainly an aspect to that, are put in there in a different order every time. I've definitely come across the same room multiple times, but I have a feeling that maybe it wasn't exactly the same, it's just they have a algorithm in place for, well, we want to make a kind of puzzle platformy room, so this is going to happen there, and so on and so forth. So, I think it's probably got something to do with that. Sweet. Speed upgrade. Now, getting to the end of the level will reward you with a boss fight, which is pretty evil. Once you beat the boss, you are guaranteed a drop, and you are also guaranteed plus health. And I can't get that high because I don't have double jump. If I'd taken the double jump perk, I would be able to get that quite easily, but never mind. And outside of that, you are able to get a bunch of passives as well as one active item, which is replaced every time you pick up a new active item. But you also have a level up system on your weapon, which can either go up or down. You can indeed lose weapon level, a little bit like, probably God Hand is a good example of that. So that's not too pleasant. And you will lose weapon experience every time you get hit. And you will gain weapon experience by picking up the blue balls. And I'm dead already. GG. That's a bit of an evil one, I've got to say. That is a bit of an evil corridor. That was quite difficult to get through. Hopefully we'll get a bit of a better run this time. So once you die, of course, that's pretty much it. You can sometimes get unlocks, depending on whether or not you've managed to pull off any kind of objective. But outside of that, start again. And as you'll see, you know, it's not exactly the same foyer room, but it's pretty similar. In this case, there's a bunch of cash for me to grab around here, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to ignore the hug bots otherwise. But I think there's just a set of different foyer rooms that you can get, and then it starts to go into the randomly generated levels. What I will say is the level design in particular is quite impressive. It's better than, I think, I'd go as far as to say any roguelite game that I've seen so far. I mean, the fact that it's in first-person perspective is impressive in and of itself, but one of its main competitors in this particular genre would be Paranormal Activity, and what I would say is the level design here is significantly better. It's mostly down to the fact that a lot of what this game does is actually focused on environmental hazards outside of just shooting. It looks like there's a lot of shooting involved, and yeah, there is, but dealing with environmental hazards, whether it be a bunch of platforms, whether it be lava, or any kind of thing like a speed block that you can go through, which will allow you to accelerate and do multiple jumps and things like that. That's all pretty interesting stuff, and not many of these first-person roguelike games really do that. I don't think there's a way for me to get through there without triple jump. Like, the fact that getting certain perks and getting multiple jumps will allow you to access hidden areas, and the fact that there are secrets on every level is pretty nice. You know, it's a good strength of the game. Guess what the weakness is? Well, you probably figured it out based on almost every rogue-lite game that I've ever looked at, and that's the combat. Every bloody time it's the combat, and just like Paranormal Activity and just like Our Darker Purpose and everything else, this game's combat is not its strong suit. It seems like almost every rogue-lite game relies on very simplistic combat that is then buffed in some way via passives. And outside of that, it relies on movement. Now, the nice thing... What is this? Oh, why did I just pick that up? That was a terrible idea. Oh, dear. I increased the difficulty. My, oh, my. Be careful about what you pick up, folks. I hope that increases drop rate or something as well. Anyway. The movement aspect of Tower of Guns is pretty good, because you're able to get up quite the speed if you strafe jump. So you can kind of get a flow going, but it can be very easily interrupted by environmental geometry. You just need to, of course, get better at it, though. Oh, I can't get up there! Come on! Maybe I can get up a little bit of speed and reach it, but that would absolutely suck. Yeah, there we go. I want this. Thank you very much. Every now and again, of course, you'll find one of these, which you can spend your money on. Increased max health, always nice. Should hit weapon level 2 in my next kill as well, which is always good, too. But the movement aspect is really interesting, especially when you pick one of the perks that gives you triple jump from the start. You can pull off some really cool moves. In this case, I picked a different perk because, especially on level 2, where there's a lot of lava, this perk is really powerful because you don't take any damage from the lava. You can also explore the lava for secrets, which is really, really awesome and will give you a nice little benefit. But outside of that, you know, movement is very important. Jumping is a good way to avoid most of the shots. Most of the shots they fire at you are very slow moving, so you can usually just jump over them. And that's the recommended way of handling an awful lot of these enemies. Alright, boss fight time incoming. But notice what it takes to actually get there. If I had the triple jump, I'd get there very easily, but as it stands, I'm actually going to have to go around this little labyrinth here in order to get there in the first place. And there's actually a power-up up there as well, so... More so, I think, than Paranormal Activity, this game rewards exploration, and that's one of the key tenets of any rogue-lite game, or even just roguelikes as well. They are games that reward exploration. So the fact that this game does, and also has some very creative level design, is a big strength. Doesn't mean the combat's very good, though. It depends on the weapon you're using. I think, you know, the rocket's probably my favorite. The little ion machine gun's pretty good, but it's just a gun. You know, it doesn't do anything else other than shoot, and you can level it up, which will give it heightened damage and so forth, and heightened fire rate, but that really is about it. So there isn't a way to switch weapons or carry multiple weapons around, and as usual, you're limited to one activatable item, and the rest of the things passive. And one thing I'll say, which I think is a bit of weakness out of this one, is that both the activatable and the passive items are not as interesting as a game like, say, Our Darker Purpose or Binding of Isaac. And not only are they very amusing or weird or disturbing in something like Binding of Isaac or Our Darker Purpose, but they also just do more interesting things. And the actives that I've found so far have been things like Restore Health, or Swap Health for XP, or Swap XP for Health. Not a huge amount of really, really interesting stuff going on there. It's a real shame. And considering it is an FPS, you think you could imbue your weapon with a number of very interesting characteristics, but actually, you can't, really. At least not in my personal experience. It may be you just have to get further on in the game. The furthest I've ever got is level 4. As I said, this game is really not easy at all. I have done quite a few runs, as you probably saw on the death counter there, and I have not got particularly far. Level 4 I think I've pulled off once, but it gets rock hard. Really difficult. Alright, boss fight time. Let's see what we get. Ah, it's a spin bot. Alright. I have weapon level 2, which should be okay. If I recall correctly, the spikes don't actually do any damage to me because of that perk I got. So, that's going to make things a little bit easier. The bombs, on the other hand, well, they certainly will, but yeah, this boss is going to go down fairly easy. Not a problem. Sweet. Bunch of weapon experience, an upgrade, which is an item. That is a siege adapter. I have never seen that one before, so it's nice to see that there's definitely more variety than what I'd seen previously. Almost hit weapon level 4 as well, which is usually pretty good. Weapon level 4 is often a huge upgrade if you can actually maintain it, although it is difficult to keep going. Don't want to kill these. I want to try this weapon. I'll try it on the next level. There we go. Sweet, and that's my second health upgrade, so it looks like we might be having a pretty good run this time around. And I missed all the secrets. Oh, it's not sending me to the foundry. That's kind of disappointing. Usually it sends you to the foundry at level 2. Apparently not this time. I was hoping for lava. Alright, so what does Siege Adapter do? Nothing, apparently. I used it and nothing happened. I'm not actually 100% sure what it does. Bit weird. Oh well, never mind. Let us continue regardless, shall we? And also, let's not die in the gears. That would be nice. So, should you buy Tower Guns? Will this be interesting to you? It will be interesting if you are the sort of person that likes exploration and can deal with very, very samey combat. The movement system helps a lot. I've said this many times, and I actually said it, I think in reference to Titanfall quite recently, when people said, oh, well, the gunplay is just like Call of Duty. Yeah, but here's the thing. Gunplay is only one small component of the combat experience. A lot of how the combat feels really comes down to how you're able to move. And Titanfall, for instance, might have Call of Duty-style gunplay, but it doesn't have Call of Duty-style movement, and that changes things completely. Gunplay is not merely a sum of its parts. And Tower of Guns has a similar thing going for it. And that's good, because, like I said, the gunplay on its own, kind of terrible. But once you get multiple jump unlocks, so you take the perk that allows you to do that at the start, and you're able to go sailing over the heads of enemy turrets and things like that, and destroy them with style, well, it can actually get pretty fun. It's just a shame that, you know, if the gunplay was even stronger, then it would be much, much easier to recommend it. But even though the movement system is very, very good, the gunplay is still... it's functional, you know? It does what it does. There's nothing to write home about. And there's so many of these rogue-lite games that do that. They have this really simplified combat system. And it puts me off a lot of games because I'm the sort of person that likes things like Metal Gear Rising and Devil May Cry and God of War and stuff like that. And so when a game comes along and says to me, oh, well, you know what? Oh, there we go. Okay, so that actually increased my fire rate. It didn't do that last time, interestingly enough. But it also means I can't move. So I want to watch out for that. So when a game comes along and says, yeah, so we got one attack. Enjoy. And you can use one gun at a time. It's hard for me to turn around and say, yeah, that sounds great. Because usually it's like, that sounds horrible. But I think Tower of Guns has come the closest as of yet to really giving me the feel that I want to play it, even though it does have a simple combat system. I would say the gunplay is not quite as good as Paranautical Activity. I think that's a little bit more fast-paced, a little bit more skill-based, a bit more Quake-like, actually, in nature. But Tower of Guns definitely has its moments, and it really comes down as well to what weapon you decide to use. How the hell do I even get up there? Jeez, this is... I think I might have to tilt here. So if you get stuck, you can actually hold down the tilt button, which will teleport you back to the top, which is a very useful feature and is actually required in some areas of the game, even if you don't make a mistake. Sweet, let's go there and try and get some health. I need it pretty badly at this point. And some weapon upgrades, because I messed that up completely. Enemy variety is quite high as well. Oh, hello. I'm not sure how I stumbled across that one. Got a double jump, though, so I can't really complain. Enemy variety is pretty high, although if you're looking for enemies with character outside the hug bots, it's just... they're mostly just robots and turrets of some sort. I mean, it is a tower of guns, after all, so the enemies are guns. Lots and lots and lots of guns that all fire projectile weapons. And you can avoid everything that gets shot at you if you're skillful enough, which I certainly am not, but... I can see the appeal of that. There's also this weird pseudo-procedurally generated story going on, which is really odd. They decided, you know what? Let's try and do a story in a procedurally generated game that is randomly generated. I've seen the same bits kind of multiple times, but the story sort of evolves as you go across. I'm not sure if it really means anything, but it's cute that they tried to put it in there, and some of the writing is actually quite funny. The game has its funny moments, too. I don't really want to spoil them, but you just have to kind of trust me when I say that it does have its moments. Which is good, because otherwise the character of the game is difficult to write home about, because it really is just turrets and guns and robots. That said, though, you gotta be impressed, I think, by the aesthetic. It's got this very Borderlands look to it, which I do like an awful lot. Bit steampunk, a little bit steampunk in places, I would say, too. It is a good-looking game, and for a procedurally generated game, they took the harder road. Something like Paranormal Activity, well, that's a game that kind of went down the Minecraft route of blocks. Which I think is a little bit easier to do if you're going to do a procedurally generated game. This game actually looks like a reasonably modern video game. Gun model's a little bit large, but well, that's not a huge complaint to make, I suppose. And I'm clearly going to die, I think. This level 2 is freaking difficult, I tell you. It's not an easy game. I've only made it to level 4 once, and for good reason. Splat. There we go. Alright, I'll set up a slightly different loadout for you so I can show you one of the other guns and perks. So very, very, very challenging. But I started off hating Tower of Guns. I think mostly just down to the fact that I saw another rogue-lite sort of game that had a really simple combat system and very few options. And also relied too much on random generation. I think Tower of Guns relies less on random generation than something like Our Darker Purpose does. Or even Risk of Rain, honestly. It's not as reliant on getting passive buffs, and there are just less items in the game in general. It is more reliant on skillful gunplay and movement. And you can set yourself up right from the start with those perks, which I like a lot, because that means that you can tailor the experience to you and not be entirely at the mercy of random chance. You know? I think that is potent. That is a really good thing to put in your game. That said, a lot of people like the random nature of this kind of stuff, and I think Tower of Guns is certainly less random than a lot of roguelite games, although something like Paranormal Activity also allows you to choose your weapon at the start, so there's definitely similarities there. It's hard to say which is better. You know, they're both pretty good at what they do, honestly. I'd certainly say Paranormal has better music, although there's certainly a bit of a charm to the weirdness that's going on with Tower of Guns as well. So I think the genre is starting to head in a pretty cool direction. Looking at the errors of previous titles and trying to resolve them. That said, the problem is a lot of people kind of got used to the errors and they started to like them. I mean, I call them errors, but for a lot of people, that's part of the appeal. Starting with a bunch of random stuff and either having a super OP run or a terrible run or whatever. I think there's less of that in Tower of Guns, and that, to me, makes the game more appealing, but simultaneously, for some people, it might make it even less appealing. Because they want that randomness. They want every run to be absolutely different, and there's a little bit less of that with Tower of Guns. But it's well executed for what it is, honestly. It's certainly repetitive, don't get me wrong, but every roguelite is. And it's a case of trying to improve upon what you did previously. The progression system is not entirely unfair. After a couple of runs, you will be able to get some unlocks, and I think that it's nice that for the most part, they actually told you when you'd get them. A lot of the time, they just don't even bother saying it. It's like, oh yeah, you're gonna get an unlock at some point, randomly. Well, this game is at least generous to you in that respect. Man, going to the boss room with a level 1 gun, I'm probably not even going to be able to beat it. Last time I ran with this gun, I think I got level 3 on the first level, and I was just a god with it. An absolute machine. I haven't really experienced any bugs either, and I think that the developer was savvy to put something called tilt in, like I showed you earlier, which will like teleport you back to a place in the level that you were previously, because that really does do a pretty good... Jeez! That is nasty. It does a good job of eliminating any potential geometry problems or just kind of getting stuck in a particular area that I think is very possible with a game like this. I'm only just going to beat it. Man, that was ugly, ugly, ugly. Firemine gun mod. Yeah, that's something I didn't mention. They still have the weapon mods. You can only equip one at a time, which I think is a bit of a shame. I think... Would that kill you? Yup! Ah, lovely. That's going to be pretty brutal. It kills you, potentially. Well, watch out for that. Would have been nice to have multiple gun mods, I think. That would be pretty cool. I beat the part-time, which was nice. That's a... You get a... I think you unlock a gun if you do that, so it's worth beating the part-time on at least one mission. But Tower Guns is a good effort, I think, for this particular genre. I'm still not 100% keen on the genre, but Tower Guns is getting me pretty close to it. And I think it probably comes in second behind Risk of Rain as a game that I would actually play on a regular basis that's part of this genre. And as you're probably well aware at this point, I do not like most of the games in this genre. Mostly due to simplistic combat systems. And I think the movement in this game saves it. Just. I'd still like more complex combat. I'd still like more complex inventory management and character progression. And there's not a huge amount of that in Tower of Guns. Even compared to other roguelite titles, the character progression is, I'd say, weaker than Our Darker Purpose, which gives you that level up system, which I like quite a lot. But in terms of movement and actual gameplay, a lot stronger. Much prefer doing this to having a top-down view where you fire in 4 directions with some weenie little weapon. This is much more enjoyable. Triple jumping and strafe jumping and getting up a good amount of speed and doing cool acrobatics and dodging projectiles in first person. A lot more fun. But the game's rock hard and I'm terrible at it. And I'll probably remain terrible at it till the end of my bloody days. Tower of Guns, ladies and gentlemen. It is available for $15. Bollocks. It's 30% off in the launch week sale. So if you get it quite early, you can get it for $10. Outside of that, it's $15 your regional equivalent. It's not too shabby. It's called Tower of Guns. My name has been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.